Ladies and gentlemen, sons and daughters of purpose, we are standing in a moment that history will not forget. But make no mistake, this is not just a political season, this is a prophetic season. What we are witnessing across the globe is not random chaos, it is a calculated shaking. Systems are trembling, nations are repositioning, prophecies are aligning. And behind the noise of media, war, and diplomacy, something far greater is unfolding. A divine script is being fulfilled right before our eyes. The world is asking, what's going on with Iran? But heaven is asking, who will understand what I am doing through it? Because Iran is not just a country in conflict. It is a key in the unfolding of a much older plan. And if you're only watching headlines, you'll miss the heaven lines. If you're only listening to experts, you'll miss the voice of the Spirit. If you're only looking at maps, you'll miss the movement of the kingdom. This is not the time to be casual. This is the time to be spiritually alert. Because everything we thought was stable is being tested, not to destroy us, but to reveal who understands the times and knows what to do. So before we go any further, I want you to prepare your mind, steady your heart, and open your spirit. Because what you're about to hear is not just information, it's revelation. Let us begin. While nations argue in headlines, the true power plays are hidden in the shadows. And that's where Iran is moving. The loudest voices are often the most distracted, and the brightest lights often blind us from what's happening in the dark. In the global theater of politics, military posturing, and economic sanctions, we often focus on what is public, what is published, and what is presented. But the real shifts, the ones that change the course of history, rarely make the front page. They are concealed in backdoor meetings, spiritual convictions, and long-term visions executed with disciplined silence. And no nation embodies this principle more than Iran in this present hour. For decades, Iran has endured crushing sanctions, international isolation, and global demonization. Yet it has not collapsed. It has not capitulated, and more importantly, it has not ceased to plan. To the natural eye, Iran appears boxed in, economically cornered, militarily encircled, diplomatically outnumbered. But while attention is fixated on the external pressure, something deeper has been growing. What the world interprets as survival is actually strategy. Iran has been building networks, reviving ideologies, and aligning itself not just with states, but with systems. There is a reason ancient empires lasted for centuries. They were not built on fleeting popularity or temporary treaties. They were rooted in worldview and driven by invisible mandates. Iran's current movement is not birthed from a moment, but from a memory, one etched in its history, religion, and sense of divine responsibility. It sees itself not merely as a country, but as a carrier of something ancient. And when a nation begins to act from a place of destiny rather than desperation, it becomes dangerously unpredictable. The global West is often reactive, moving from crisis to crisis, election to election, pole to pole. Iran, by contrast, has learned the art of patience. It has accepted discomfort as a currency and learned how to translate pain into purpose. The unseen strategy is this. While the world keeps waiting for Iran to collapse under pressure, Iran is using that pressure as fuel to refine its alliances, deepen its resolve, and extend its reach. Most governments think in terms of quarterly gains and 4-year terms. Iran thinks in decades, and in some cases centuries. This is why what seems like stagnation is actually strategy. It knows when to hide its moves. It knows when to provoke and when to retreat. It knows how to let its enemies exhaust themselves, while it quietly builds a network that is not limited by borders, religions, or formal treaties. And that is where the world is being caught off guard. Because Iran's alliances are not always formal, they are often ideological. They are rooted in shared enemies, shared grievances, and shared endgames. They include proxy groups, underground organizations, and governments that may not publicly endorse Iran but benefit from its defiance. These relationships are not defined by press conferences, but by purpose. They operate in the gray spaces between diplomacy and warfare, between politics and prophecy. The average observer sees oil prices, sanctions, or a nuclear deal, but the deeper analyst sees something far more profound. A reshaping of the Middle East spiritual and strategic map. Iran is not just forging relationships. It is reviving a vision of regional influence that challenges the very assumptions on which modern alliances are based. And while much of the world has been distracted by flashpoints, wars, elections, scandals, Iran has been quietly assembling a mosaic of influence that stretches from Baghdad to Beirut, from Damascus to Sana'a, and now increasingly into Africa, Latin America, and even Eastern Europe. Its reach is not only military, it's cultural, religious, and psychological. It offers an alternative to the Western order, not just in politics, but in identity. To those who feel abandoned, betrayed, or colonized, Iran offers resistance. To those who seek meaning beyond materialism, it offers conviction. And to those who hunger for power in a world that ignores them, it offers partnership. This is not to glorify its actions, but to recognize its methodology. Iran's greatest strength lies not in its weapons, but in its willingness to see the invisible and act on it. While others are playing for power, Iran is moving with purpose. It sees a world beyond treaties and trade routes. It sees a spiritual order rising through a geopolitical one. And in that vision, the real battlefield is not on the ground, but in the soul of nations. When unlikely allies align, it signals prophetic disruption. These aren't ordinary political collaborations. These are strategic unions that defy logic, confuse analysts, and frustrate historians. Iran is at the center of this shift, not forming alliances based merely on shared ideology, but on shared destiny. And destiny has a pattern that the natural eye cannot see, but the spiritual man discerns. Iran is not choosing partners because they agree on everything. It is choosing them because they are positioned for something bigger than agreement. Agreement is natural, alignment is divine. Agreement happens when two parties share the same ideas. Alignment happens when two parties serve the same purpose, even if they come from different doctrines, traditions, or even religions. Iran is building alliances with forces that, on the surface, may appear unrelated. Communist regimes, secular powers, religious radicals, and even economic opportunists. What could they possibly have in common? Not much if you're looking through the lens of ideology. But if you look through the lens of destiny, especially a prophetic one, what once looked disjointed now looks divinely arranged. Iran has realized that power in this age does not come from uniformity, it comes from utility. Who can be used for the vision? Who can be activated in this moment to shake the systems that have long ruled unchecked? That is how Iran is thinking. Not who agrees with us, but who is ready to break the current world order with us. And when this kind of alignment happens, you are no longer witnessing politics. You are witnessing prophecy. Prophetic disruption always begins with confusion at the surface. It looks like instability, like chaos. Nations don't understand why long-standing enemies are suddenly talking, why ideological opposites are suddenly shaking hands, why military powers that once had nothing in common are now doing drills together, signing silent agreements and sharing intelligence. But prophecy often wears the mask of confusion before it reveals the face of divine timing. Iran knows it is not strong enough to dominate the world alone, but it also knows it doesn't have to be. In the realm of prophetic movement, dominance is not achieved through size, but through synchronization. If the right players move in the right rhythm, even a small power can shift global balance. That's what Iran is doing. Synchronizing, pulling together threads from Russia's military ambition, China's economic leverage, North Korea's defiance, and proxy groups that operate in spiritual zealotry. This is not coincidence. This is coordination. This is not agreement. It is alignment. And what makes this more dangerous is that many of these allies do not even like each other. Their cultures clash, their systems conflict, their goals don't fully match. But in a prophetic disruption, unity is not required. Convergence is. Even enemies will share a table if they believe the meal will weaken their greater adversary. This is what happened throughout history when global empires began to shift. Rome fell not just from external invasions, but from strange alliances that slowly unraveled its structure. Babylon, Persia, Greece, all faced moments when unlikely partners rose with a force greater than the sum of their parts. We are in such a moment again. Iran is moving with an ancient script in mind. It understands that the end-time battles will not be won through predictable alliances. They will be waged through prophetic ones. That means the alliances Iran is forming are not just political, they are spiritual, regional, and eschatological. They are born out of a vision for a future order that doesn't yet exist, but is already being birthed in secret places. So while the world watches for peace treaties, Iran is watching for pressure points. While others are counting votes and military bases, Iran is counting moments, kairos moments, when systems are weak, distracted, or divided. That is when alignment happens. That is when destiny calls unlikely allies to march together, not because they love each other, but because they recognize they are part of something larger than themselves. And if you only look for agreement, you'll miss what is really unfolding. Because what is coming is not based on mutual respect, it's based on mutual recognition of a season. Iran is not concerned with who fits its profile. It is looking for who fits its prophecy. Watch the alignment, not the agreement, because in this hour, the map is not being redrawn by diplomats. It is being rewritten by destiny. The Middle East is not a region, it's a stage for global reckoning. To reduce it to oil fields, desert conflicts, or border disputes is to miss the script entirely. What is unfolding in that land is not just geopolitical, it's spiritual, generational, and prophetic. It is the intersection of heaven's timeline and earth's systems, where ancient thrones are being challenged, legacies are being contested, and the battle for dominion is being reignited. You cannot study the Middle East as merely a geographic zone. You must study it as a stage, carefully built, intentionally chosen, and historically anointed. From the days of Eden to the days of empires, from Babylon to Persia, from Rome to the Crusades, every major global reset has touched this soil. This land is a prophetic portal, and those who control it rarely do so without spiritual consequence. Iran understands this. Others are after control. Iran is after legacy. Others are fighting for profit. Iran is positioning for prophecy. This is not just about oil pipelines, it's about power lines. Not the kind that run electricity, but the kind that carry spiritual voltage across generations. The Middle East has always been the place where heaven and hell compete for human allegiance. It's where empires are birthed and broken, where prophets rise and kings fall, where the lines between scripture and strategy blur. This is the land where altars were built, where covenants were made, where blood has cried from the ground for centuries and still cries today. Iran is not the only player on this stage, but it is one of the few that understands the script is older than any modern constitution. It sees itself not as a pawn, but as a steward of an ancient role. A nation doesn't endure centuries of opposition and still remain a force unless it believes it is carrying something divine, something timeless. Iran's rise is not accidental, it is intentional. Because this region has always drawn the attention of both angels and empires. Look closely. Every time the world enters a crisis, the Middle East becomes the epicenter, not because of coincidence, but because of calling. This is the spiritual heart of the earth, and when the heart beats erratically, the whole body feels it. That is why no matter how far removed a nation might be geographically, it cannot escape the ripple effects of what happens in that soil. Because in the spirit realm, geography is not about distance, it's about destiny. The battle over Jerusalem is not just about land, it's about lordship. The battle over Syria is not just about political vacuum, it's about prophetic fulfillment. The war drums in Yemen, the movements in Iraq, the chaos in Lebanon, the pressure on Israel, these are not isolated sparks. These are the sounds of something ancient awakening. Thrones are shaking, principalities are repositioning, global players are acting, but the script they're following is far older than they know. Iran is reading that script, and it knows that the Middle East is not just a battleground for nations, it's a battleground for narratives. Whose story will shape the future? Whose version of history will be told to the next generation? Whose vision of dominion will be accepted by the masses? That's what's really at stake. This is why Iran is investing not only in weapons but in worldviews. It funds ideology as much as insurgency. It exports belief as much as it does influence. Because this is not a war over land, it's a war over lordship. It's not just about who wins, it's about whose will is fulfilled. And when thrones are involved, you must prepare for the unexpected. Because when legacy is on the line, logic gets suspended. Men will ally with enemies, betray friends, and sacrifice their own people for the chance to sit on a throne that they believe destiny has promised. That's why this conflict is deeper than negotiation. It's older than treaties, and it's bigger than politics. You're not just looking at a region, you're looking at a realm where spiritual laws govern physical outcomes, a realm where generational curses, blessings, and covenants collide. And in that realm, Iran is not just fighting, it is fulfilling. Heaven has timetables, and so does darkness. The movement we see today is not spontaneous, it is synchronized. The alliances now being activated were not born in the minds of modern politicians or war rooms. They were whispered in ancient scrolls, foreshadowed in prophetic dreams, and sealed in covenants made long before borders were drawn or flags were raised. Iran, whether knowingly or unknowingly, is not just maneuvering through modern geopolitics. It is walking out a script that was written in both scripture and strategy. There are two calendars operating in the earth, the calendar of man and the calendar of the divine. One tracks elections, economic quarters, and news cycles. The other tracks obedience, prophecy, and appointed seasons. Heaven moves not on human demand but on divine timing. And yet, what many forget is that the kingdom of darkness also operates with timelines. It imitates, it anticipates, and it accelerates because it knows its window is limited. That is why we are seeing a sudden quickening, a convergence, a swelling of strange alliances and unpredictable movements. Because both heaven and hell understand the hour has come. Iran's current alignment with powers like Russia, China, and rogue non-state actors is not just political opportunism. It is the manifestation of long-anticipated alignments spoken of in visions, warnings, and ancient texts. The kings of the East, the Northern Bear, the alliances that encircle Israel, the rise of coalitions with antichrist spirits. These are not new theories, they are old truths. Iran is becoming a hub in the fulfillment of that design. It is playing its part in a larger, darker choreography, one that exists to challenge and provoke the order that heaven established long ago. And this is where many miss the moment, because they look at Iran and see resistance, rebellion, or retaliation. But spiritually, what we are watching is rehearsal. Iran is preparing the world stage for the next act. It is aligning itself with those who may not share its values, but who are united in their role. To resist divine order, to confront covenant people, and to usher in a moment where the systems of man collide with the sovereignty of God. It is crucial to understand. Darkness doesn't wait for permission. It moves with precision. The enemy of truth is not lazy, he is strategic. And when he senses that divine timelines are being activated, he responds with acceleration. That is why there is pressure, tension, and confusion globally. Because what is being played out in the natural is a reflection of what is intensifying in the spiritual. Iran, through calculated moves and hidden partnerships, is aligning itself not just horizontally with other nations, but vertically with ancient principalities. Iran's boldness is not simply the result of military ambition. It is emboldened by a sense of divine timing. It believes it is stepping into a prophetic role. Whether you call it eschatology or ideology, the result is the same. They are moving with confidence because they believe they are right on time. And this is where the danger lies, not just in weapons, but in certainty. A nation driven by certainty will endure sanctions, survive isolation, and ignore the rules of conventional warfare. It will wait years to strike. It will build in secret. It will activate alliances that look dormant because it is governed not by opportunity, but by a sense of divine appointment. But here's the truth. Heaven also has a timeline, and it is not delayed. While darkness scrambles to align, heaven is already ahead. The clock of prophecy does not tick according to man's schedule. And just as Iran is moving according to what it perceives as destiny, heaven is positioning people, governments, and movements that will fulfill the greater purpose of divine restoration. We are in a season where both light and darkness are accelerating. It is not random. It is not chaos. It is convergence. When spiritual timelines align, earthly events erupt. What we're seeing with Iran is not just the fruit of years of political tension, it is the revealing of a deeper, older battle plan. One that has been in motion long before our modern minds could comprehend it. The world is playing chess, but Iran is playing prophetic backgammon. On the surface, this may look like chaos, unpredictable moves, strange alliances, confusing strategies, and unconventional warfare. But beneath the noise and disruption lies a calculated rhythm. Iran's moves, though often dismissed as erratic by political analysts, are actually guided by something older than politics, ancient intelligence and spiritual awareness. And while the world plays chess, thinking in straight lines, predictable strategies and visible tactics, Iran is rolling according to a different set of rules. A game that blends divine memory with disruptive momentum. Chess is a game of intellect and foresight. It teaches players to anticipate, to defend, to sacrifice, and to checkmate. World powers play this game well, calculating every move with diplomacy, sanctions, military posturing, and economic influence. They seek control of the board, position, and prestige. But Iran, in its current prophetic posture, is playing something deeper. Prophetic backgammon is not about linear dominance. It's about positioning amidst pressure. It's about knowing that even if you're knocked backward, the movement is still forward because the dice are in the hand of divine destiny. Backgammon is a game of controlled chaos, strategic but flexible, planned yet unpredictable. It reflects life in the Middle East far more accurately than the rigidity of chess. Iran understands this. It has mastered the art of moving in chaos. It thrives where there is confusion. It advances through disruption. It does not need a clean board or a symmetrical path. All it needs is momentum and the belief that it is playing from a position of prophecy, not pressure. This is why Iran can absorb setbacks that would cripple other nations. Sanctions don't stop it, they strengthen it. Isolation doesn't break it, it refines it. While other nations panic under instability, Iran adapts, reorganizes, and waits. It moves pieces that seem meaningless to outsiders. But to those who understand the spiritual depth behind the moves, the intention is clear. This is not a reaction, it is revelation. Iran's leaders, clerics, and strategists view their nation not merely as a player on the board, but as the carrier of a divine timeline. They move with an eschatological awareness that most secular governments ignore. Every military drill, every regional influence, every partnership, whether with a superpower or a shadow group, is not just a means to an end. It's a step in a prophetic sequence. That's what makes their strategy so difficult to counter. You cannot fight prophecy with politics. You cannot block revelation with resolutions. What Iran is doing doesn't make sense on the board of modern diplomacy, but it makes perfect sense in the arena of spiritual warfare. Iran does not play to win quickly, it plays to endure deeply. In chess, players panic when they lose a queen or bishop. But Iran does not mind losing pieces. Its strength is in staying in the game long enough to outlast opponents who are playing for speed and optics. Iran plays for legacy. It plays for alignment. It plays for the moment that heaven allows history to bend toward divine disruption. That's why it is willing to form temporary alliances with those it disagrees with. That's why it can support a religious militia on one front and negotiate with an atheist power on another. Because to Iran, the method may change, but the mission remains the same. In backgammon, what looks like a loss is often just repositioning. And Iran understands that. Every strike it absorbs, every delay it endures, every time it's knocked backward, it's recalculating. Not retreating, it's waiting for the moment when all the pieces, seemingly scattered, begin to converge. And when they do, it won't look like a traditional victory. It will look like divine orchestration. What the world calls erratic, Iran calls prophetic. What the world calls instability, Iran sees as opportunity. Because when you're not playing for applause or approval, you can move with a boldness that confuses your enemies and fulfills your assignment. Iran is not seeking to dominate the world in the traditional sense. It is seeking to usher in a moment where its role in prophetic history is undeniable. It is not chasing headlines. It is answering ancient calls. While others seek position, Iran seeks place. Its place in the story that was written long before global powers ever took their seats. And so, while nations argue over strategies and sanctions, Iran continues to move quietly, purposefully, prophetically, because it's not trying to win the game the world is playing. It's playing the game heaven already mapped out. What shocks the world is often what heaven already knew. Surprise is a product of limited vision, but heaven sees from the end to the beginning. Its knowledge is not reactive, it is revelatory. The movements, alliances, disruptions, and global tremors that are sending shockwaves through the media, financial systems, and political circles are not interruptions to heaven. They are fulfillments. They are confirmations that prophecy still governs history and that divine plans are unfolding right on time, whether man is ready or not. We live in a world that has traded discernment for data. The nations boast in intelligence reports, satellites, economic forecasts, and political analytics. But none of these can perceive the invisible realm where true strategy is formed. Heaven is not impressed by a nation's nuclear capability or a superpower's surveillance grid. Because when spiritual blindness sets in, all the intelligence in the world becomes foolishness in the face of prophecy. Iran's rise, its alliances, its positioning, it is shocking to the world, but to heaven it is not new. It was seen, it was known, it was allowed. Because nothing moves in the earth that has not first been measured in the spirit. This is why heaven does not panic when empires rise or when alliances shift. It already accounted for the betrayal, the confusion, and the conflict. What seems sudden to man is often settled in heaven. The problem is not the shaking. The problem is that we have lost the ability to see it coming. Spiritual blindness is the true crisis of the age. Governments can't see what's moving beneath the surface. Leaders misinterpret patterns. Pastors remain silent. And people are paralyzed by headlines because they have no insight into heaven's timeline. And when the church loses sight, the nation loses direction. When spiritual perception fades, look around. Nations are investing billions into defending the wrong gates. They're preparing for cyber attacks while ignoring spiritual breaches. They're racing to dominate trade routes while leaving their moral and ideological foundations exposed. This is the fruit of blindness. It causes leaders to react emotionally instead of responding prophetically. It causes systems to miscalculate threat levels because they only measure what can be counted, not what can be discerned. Iran understands the advantage of the blind. That's why it moves in silence. It thrives in the shadows. It watches while others sleep. It plans while others debate. And then it shocks the world. But if we had been listening to heaven's frequency, we would not have been surprised. Because what is shocking to CNN is familiar to the Spirit of God. There is a veil over the eyes of many decision makers, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack intimacy with truth. When you are disconnected from the source, you will always misread the signs. When you neglect prayer, you will misinterpret power. And when you abandon the prophetic, you will fall prey to the political. Iran's moves are not just geopolitical, they are spiritual maneuvers. And those who are not spiritually awake will continue to call prophetic events coincidences and divine warnings surprises. But heaven is not surprised. It has been speaking, warning, and revealing all along. The issue is not that God stopped speaking, it's that we stopped listening. We must break free from the fog of distraction and reclaim the posture of watchmen, because this is not the time for reaction, it is the time for revelation. The world is shaking, not because it is out of control, but because it is under divine permission. Everything that can be shaken is being shaken, so that only what is unshakable remains. When the veil lifts, and it will, nations will look back and realize that they were warned, that there were signs, that the script was already written. They will realize that they were caught off guard, not because there was no truth, but because they had no sight. And by then, what looked like strategy will be exposed as spiritual negligence. Because in the end, what shocks the world, heaven already knew. So the question is not what is Iran doing? The real question is what is heaven allowing? What is the kingdom revealing? What is God saying to his people right now in the midst of the shaking? Because while nations align for power, God is aligning people for purpose. This is not the time to panic, it's the time to perceive. This is not the moment to be distracted by headlines, it's the moment to interpret the signs. The age of spiritual blindness is over. Heaven is raising up watchmen, voices, and vessels who do not echo fear but declare kingdom truth with boldness and clarity. Let the church no longer be silent while prophecy unfolds. Let us no longer sleep while kings and kingdoms plot. Let us rise with insight, speak with authority, and move with urgency, because the world is not waiting for another opinion. It's waiting for a demonstration of truth. You were not born in this generation by accident. You were sent. You were assigned. You were placed here by divine design to discern this moment. Not from the ground, but from the throne. So I declare to you, the shaking will continue, the systems will fail, and the world will be shocked, but the kingdom will stand. Because governments may fall, treaties may break, alliances may shift, but the word of the King is unshakable. The timetable of heaven is unstoppable, and the purpose of God is irreversible. Lift your eyes, people of purpose. The prophetic hour is not coming. It's here. Let those who have ears to hear what the Spirit is saying to the nations.